Hello friends. So recently over on my main channel, I did a video all about some adult fantasy books that I think are great to try if you're just getting into adult fantasy. And I wanted to do a similar style video kind of paired with that one, where I talk about some video games that I think are great to try out if you are new to video games. I know that if you didn't grow up playing video games like I did and a lot of other gamers did, then it can be very intimidating to walk into a video game store and even know what you're doing. Maybe you have one console, you don't even know what games go on what consoles. So I wanted to give a list of video games that I think are perfect for newbies and also are pretty widely accessible across various different consoles. I also wanted the list to start with the easiest of easy games and then progress into games that are more difficult, because I know not everybody who's trying to get into video games necessarily wants Pac-Man level of basic. They want something a little bit more difficult or maybe a little bit more complex, but also will help them out a little bit as they're getting used to it. So I am going to have varying degrees of difficulty. Before I get into it, if you yourself are a gamer and you have recommendations for video games that you think are great for beginners, feel free to leave those in the comment section down below. That way anybody who comes to this video not only has my recommendations, but yours as well. With all that said, the first one I'm going to start with is the easiest thing to get into. It's also free, and that would be Fall Guys. Fall Guys is absolutely ridiculous. It is like Candyland and a fever dream mixed together, so it's very bright and very vivid and really silly, and it is so much fun to play with your friends. So one of the things that I'll do, because you can play this cross platforms, you can play it with another person in the same room if you happen to both have a Switch, something like that. Or in my case, we have a PlayStation and we have a Switch, so sometimes my husband and I will play together and we're literally sitting right next to each other, but we're using different consoles. We will often play with our friends, and you can do a duet where you have two people that are competing against other people, or you can play with groups of four. Sometimes you can do solo where you're by yourself and you're competing against a bunch of other people who are also playing by themselves. And the idea behind the game is baked right into the name, which is try not to fall, guys. That's it. Try not to fall. Try not to fall off of the most ridiculous of platforms and various different level designs. It's a blast. It's so much fun, and pretty much all you have to do is jump or try to avoid getting hit by stuff. That is definitely really, really easy. Going a tiny step above that, next we have the game Wolf Among Us. So there is a style of video game which Wolf Among Us falls into, where you are essentially watching a show, but every now and then you are tasked with actually interacting with the game. Barely, though. Every now and then it'll have you press X when the circle is closing in on the X button on the screen. Every now and then you have to tap circle a bunch of times, and it's just to keep the story moving along at various key moments. But that's it. You don't have to memorize certain patterns like you would in certain arcade style of fight games. You don't have to worry about timing your moves perfectly with the boss's moves. You don't have to worry about any of that. You don't have to worry about combinations. All you have to do is, when prompted, press the button. And often the prompting will be very generous. So really, it's just being able to engage with an interesting story. In the case of Wolf Among Us, this is actually based on a particular comic book series by Bill Willingham, where you are following some traditional characters from fairy tales as they are trying to live glamored within our own world among us. Hence the name Wolf Among Us, as the big bad wolf is the sheriff of all of these fairy tale people. So they are trying to investigate a murder, and it's a ton of fun. It's very easy to get into, just like a lot of these on this list. I think it's a great one for beginners. After that, it should be no surprise whatsoever that the next recommendation is Final Fantasy X. I love Final Fantasy X. I love it with my whole heart. I am very nostalgic with this game, and that should be comforting to you to know that I played this as a child. So you definitely can play it as an adult. You really don't have to do much at all. What I was discussing with Wolf Among Us, where you are occasionally pressing buttons, this one, you just walk across the land of Spira as this young man who was transported from his city. He then gets teleported to 1,000 years in the future, and the world looks very different. There's this creature called Sin that is continuing to wreak havoc on the land of Spira. And Titus is the main character's name, finds himself paired up with a summoner, a woman who is tasked with defeating sin, and to do this she summons these magical beings known as Aeons. And she is on a quest to attain all of the various different Aeons so that she can become powerful enough to defeat sin. That is the very basic synopsis for that game. There's so much more to uncover. If you are somebody who loves epic fantasy, you love immersive worlds, you love diving into a story and just escaping into something beautiful and mystical and magical, Final Fantasy X is that. It's so good. It has a campy but really endearing story. It's got a beautiful love story in it. It's got great friendships in it. It's got funny dialogue. It's got really heartbreaking moments, an amazing soundtrack, and all you have to do basically throughout the entire game is when it's your turn, you press a button. That's it. You get all the time in the world because the combat system is known as turn-based, meaning that nothing will happen when it's your turn. Literally nothing. You can be like, I'm hungry. I'm gonna go get some food. And you can leave for 3 hours and come back and your characters will still just be waiting until you take your turn. So you don't have to stress at all about timing. What you do want to do with this game, and why I'm putting it in the middle of this list, is because you will need to level up. So you will have to pay attention to the leveling up system. What you can do if you want is you can buy a strategy guide, or because it's 2023, you can just look stuff up online. But you can look at guides to help you figure out the best route to try and get you to a point where you will be strong enough every time you enter a new area of the map, and that you know how to actually go up against the enemies. If you're not used to playing RPGs, you might forget what particular items cancel out certain afflictions that you'll end up having. The game will tell you, will help you out, but if you're not accustomed to it, it can take you a lot of time to scroll through your items and try to figure out what the right one is. So just having a tiny bit of assistance from a friend or the internet can be very helpful, but when it comes to actual gameplay, you can't get much easier than turn-based. From here, I am increasing the difficulty by quite a bit, and I am recommending the 2013 reboot of Tomb Raider. The sequels to this reboot kind of sucked, so not those. But the first one was actually, I thought, really fun. And Tomb Raider, similar to Final Fantasy, is one of those franchises you've likely heard about, whether you've interacted with the gaming world or not. So it's a fun opportunity to discover Tomb Raider for the first time. And this one I actually think you can play in a way where it helps you out quite a bit. And if you die, the game does give you the chance to do that exact part over and over and over again until you get it right. So you don't have to worry about you get all the way really, really far and then you die and you have to go all the way back and you've spent hours, but you didn't get the chance to save it. Really, if you get into an area where Lara is going down a river and she's gonna get stabbed through by a sharp log or something horrifically violent, because they find really horrifically violent ways to kill her in that game. And if you get stabbed the first time, then it'll just start you right at that river again and you try to navigate so you don't get stabbed through by a log. And then if you get stabbed through by a different log, then you can be like, oh, now I know I gotta shift this direction when I get to that spot. And then once you get past it, you're on to the next area. There is some shooting involved in this game as well. And I think that the navigation is freer than the previous games that I've talked about, which is why I'm having it as this next step up. I also think having a shooting component to the game helps to open up that door to various different kinds of shooters, because there are a lot, and I think that will let you know if that's kind of your game style or not. Next one after this is arguably the most difficult. I am putting it though in the 5th place spot, and that would be Ori and the Blind Forest. Ori and the Blind Forest is very much a timing game. My dog is coming into the room if you hear the little tip tap of her paws on the ground. But anyway, Ori is a timing game. So previously, a lot of the other ones, especially Final Fantasy, they're ones, like I was saying, you can relax. You're pretty good. Just go about your day. Man, my dog, she's sneezing and she's spinning in circles. She just laid down, so hopefully we're good. I don't know if you could hear her. Anyway, Ori is the kind of game where you're going to have a certain part of the map where you have to jump, and then you have to double jump, and then you'll have to swing, and then you have to swing, and then swing again, and then you gotta land on a certain spot and make sure you jump exactly. and it's gonna gradually build to get harder and harder and harder, but it's gonna start off relatively easy is maybe not the right way to put it. I'm really pushing it with Ori being on this list. Part of why Ori is on this list, though, is because while a lot of these games I tried to ensure were on various different consoles, this one is not available on PlayStation, but it is available on Switch. And I know a lot of people who are not intense gamers still end up having a Switch because they play games like Animal Crossing. And so this would be a good one to try out because its story, it's very minimalistic in its storytelling, but it's so beautiful and it's so sweet, and it's also really tragic, and it's so visually stunning, and the music is absolutely beautiful. So for all those reasons, I think it's gonna make you want to keep going. And like I said, it does kind of progressively get harder and harder. I'm also recommending it though because it's a platformer, which means that as you move, the screen moves. It's almost like a much more difficult version of Mario. Heard of the game Metroid Dread? That's the style of game that you're looking at, but Ori is less about the combat. It's kind of just focused on the level design. And then there is a sequel. The sequel is more difficult in that it incorporates additional movements and it incorporates more fighting in the game. But in this first one, I think that if you're looking for a really, really, really stunning game that is going to push your abilities, you're going to have to retry things quite often, this is a good one. Part of why I feel okay putting it on this list is because one of my really good friends, she's somebody who, when she's playing video games, she has to actually look at the remote pretty often. And she's the one that recommended this game to me. So if she can do it, you can do it. Which isn't to say that she's bad at games. I'm just saying she would recommend it to you as well. And then last on the list, this might be kind of a surprise, but The Witcher 3. The reason I'm including this on the list is because there are various different difficulty levels that you can choose from. If you're new to gaming, but you want to dive headfirst into the deep end when it comes to some of the best, most well-known games that are modern, then Witcher 3 is one of the biggest. It's one that a lot of people now have as at least in their top 5, if not one of their favorite games of all time. And it's for good reason. This game has fantastic characters in general, character design, character interactions. The side quests are actually interesting. They have great stories. The main quest is actually interesting. The world, you just get so sucked in and you just want to keep traversing the map and you want to find every new place, and sometimes there's a question mark on the map and you get there for whatever reason, the question mark is still there and you think there must be some kind of cave here or something, and then you just get so pulled into the navigation, and then all of a sudden you'll get a side quest and you're like, ugh, I'll go do the side quest, I guess. And then there's some really engaging story where it's suddenly really sad and you're like, what did I just get myself into? And you will be so gripped by this game. Is it daunting at first? Yes. If you've never played an open world game, then when you first start this, you're gonna be like, what am I supposed to do? And there are plenty of people online who will help you. There's plenty of guides. If you want to follow specifically, you can even find people on YouTube who will give you a step-by-step of what you should do and when and where you should go, what weapons you should use, what potions you should brew. There will be people that will give you all that guidance if you need it. But if you, like I said, want to dive headfirst into the deep end, you can just go for it. There are easier modes set up. There is a really great story, and there are going to be tutorials throughout. It's not an Elden Ring scenario, which is known for just being like, figure it out, dummy. It's not like that. It will help you out. It will give you tutorials if you so choose to use them. So it will help you out, which is why I think it's okay to include it on this list. Obviously, I went from ridiculously easy to actually fairly challenging, but I still think that all these are ones that I would recommend to people, even if they've never played video games very much, if at all. But I did have these varying degrees of difficulty, so feel free in your recommendations to say 1 through 6, where you would place any of your recommendations and how they would relate to the ones that I recommended. So there's almost tiers that people can check out. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope this is helpful. If you are planning to get into video games, let me know what game you're going to try out first. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.